After the fall, Hungary, the sky was red at dawn when John stepped out of the crumbling apartment building near Keleti railway station. The air reeked of burnt plastic and rot, as if the city itself was decaying. Budapest was no longer alive, just a memory made of ruins and bones. John carried an old hiking backpack on his shoulder, a rusted axe at his side, and an old military compass hanging from his neck, his only reliable guide in the madness. His goal was clear: reach Jiga, where he hoped to find his family. The last radio transmission had come 3 weeks ago, on a hidden frequency. It simply said, "We're alive. Bunker beneath Jiga." Since then, nothing but silence. John didn't know if they were still breathing, but it was all he had left. The streets were empty, but he didn't trust the silence. The infected, now called Growlers, didn't always make noise. They waited. He passed by an abandoned parking garage where he had once taken shelter. Nothing was safe anymore, especially not in daylight. He tried to escape via the M1 highway, but the first bridge had been blown up. Wreckage and infected blocked every road, some cars still smoldering. A scream echoed in the distance, human or not, he didn't know. He decided to avoid the highways, cutting through smaller towns instead. The compass and a crumpled map were all he had to guide him. It was near Etiak when he met him. The man had taken shelter in a hunting blind on the edge of a forest, moving silently with a weathered hunting bow. At first, John thought he was dangerous, and he was, but not an enemy. Didn't speak, only nodded. The two men began walking together, wordless as true survivors often are. The wine cellars and the hills around Etiak were strange. People moved on wagons, dolls hung from trees, and candles flickered in abandoned chapels. A cult had taken root, believing the infected were cleansed. John had escaped at night, after discovering the cult sacrificed their own children. The darkness of those caves stayed with them. They crossed the forests of hiding for days at a time. There were few infected here, but the wolves had returned to the woods and howled at night, always lit a small fire, carefully hidden. John grew used to his presence, even though the man rarely spoke. The silence became comforting. Before reaching, they came upon a collapsed railway bridge with a river below. They had to swim, the water ice-cold, but there was no other choice. On the other side, a woman's scream rang out, but they didn't stop. It could have been a trap. Looked back though. John saw something in his eyes. Someone he had lost was ruled by a survivor group calling themselves the Brotherhood of Rebirth. They enforced order with violence, executing rule-breakers beneath the great Tural statue. John infiltrated them briefly, but couldn't stand the tyranny. They escaped one night after blowing up the group's supply depot. The flames cracked the statue. Near they found the remains of a military convoy, scattered and looted. That's when the shots came, ambushed by a group calling themselves the Quiet Ones. Their leader, a former virologist, claimed they were working on a cure. The truth was more disturbing: they experimented on people. John still bore the mark of a syringe on his arm. Days later, they escaped, but not without cost. Had been bitten. He didn't tell John at first, hiding the wound. John only noticed when grew feverish. In an abandoned pharmacy, John tried to treat the symptoms, but they both knew. Finally asked him to leave him behind. As he approached Jiga, the roads teemed with life again, not infected, but raiders. John traveled by night, slept by day, always hiding. Around the city, trenches had been dug as if someone had tried to hold the infection back. The main bridge into the city was barricaded. John climbed across the ruins, alone. He found the entrance to the bunker near the Danube, hidden behind a rusted water tower. He entered the coach, the one his wife had given him. The keypad beeped, then lit up green. He stepped inside. The silence inside was louder than the world outside. Beds lay empty, shelves stripped clean, and streaks of blood marked the floor. Someone had been here recently. Written on the wall in chalk were the words, "We had to move." Pannonholmer. John dropped to his knees but didn't cry. He just stared. In the corner, a child's drawing lay of a house, a tree, and a little girl holding her father's hand. On the back, in shaky letters, "Come find us, Daddy, we're waiting." John clenched his fist. There was still hope. The journey wasn't over. He set out again, now heading toward the Benedictine monastery. Pannonholmer wasn't far, but what awaited there, he couldn't guess. Still, John no longer felt fear. Loss had become his strength. He wasn't just surviving, he was going home. From a hilltop he finally saw the monastery's tower. The setting sun painted the stone walls red. Smoke rose from one of the buildings. Fire, or perhaps life. John stepped off the bicycle he'd found near a farmhouse, and he began the final climb. The last few kilometers were the longest. Every sound in the woods seemed magnified: the crunch of his boots, the birds suddenly taking flight, the occasional rustle in the bushes. John kept his axe in hand, the bicycle long since abandoned in the tall grass. As he climbed the slope, he caught glimpses of the monastery's ancient stone walls. It looked like something out of a forgotten time. Smoke still rose from a chimney, thin and steady. That was a good sign. Controlled fire meant people, maybe even his people, but it also meant risk. Not everyone left alive in this world was worth finding. John approached cautiously, moving from tree to tree, avoiding the open path. He paused at the edge of the final clearing where the forest gave way to a wide field. A lone scarecrow stood watch in the middle of the field, dressed in military fatigues. That wasn't for birds. It was a warning. He circled the field, keeping low, until he reached a small stone archway. The gate was open, but just barely. He knocked once on the old wood, out of instinct rather than hope. No response, only the wind. Inside, the monastery grounds were eerily quiet. The ancient buildings stood still, timeless, but with new additions: solar panels, makeshift antennas, and sandbag barricades. Someone had fortified the place. Someone was still here. But where were they? He moved silently, following a sound of faint clang of metal, like someone working. It came from the central courtyard. As he rounded the corner, he saw a teenage boy, no older than 15, sharpening a blade. The boy froze when he saw John, then grabbed a crossbow from the ground. "Don't move." John raised his hand slowly. "I'm not here to hurt you." The boy didn't lower the weapon. "Name?" John swallowed. "John, I'm looking for my daughter." The boy studied him, then slowly relaxed. "You came from the east." John nodded. "Then you're lucky. Not many make it past the Brotherhood." The name brought back flames and screams. John said nothing. "You should see," the boy added. "She know what to do." He led John through a maze of stone hallways, converted into living quarters, bunk beds, old radios, food stores. It was a functioning shelter. They passed a few other quiet, wary people, a man with a bandaged leg, a woman who looked pregnant. Everyone carried a weapon, even the children. John felt eyes on him the whole way. Trust wasn't easily earned. Turned out to be in her 60s, lean and sharp-eyed. She wore a priest's collar over a camo jacket, and her hands were stained with oil. "You've come a long way," she said. "From Budapest." John nodded. "And you're looking for family." He showed her the drawing. His expression softened. "Yes, she was here. Your wife and daughter." John's heart nearly stopped. "Where?" he asked, hesitated. "They were here. But something happened." She gestured to a map on the wall. 2 weeks ago, a group of raiders came from the north. We held them off, but they took hostages." John felt the blood drain from his face. "They're not dead," she added quickly. "At least, not that we know. They were taken toward the Bacchany Hills, probably to an old military base near Zurich." John clenched his jaw. "Another journey. Another battle. You've already come so far." EMRTA said gently, "You don't have to go alone." But John knew he would. It was personal now, and he couldn't let anyone else die for his family. That night, he barely slept. The monastery walls were safe, for now, but his mind was already on the road ahead. Zurich, mountains, cold, hostels, and maybe, just maybe, his daughter, still alive. He awoke before dawn, packed silently, filled his canteen, took a map, and accepted a new code from one of the monks. Handed him a walkie-talkie. "Channel 4, we'll be listening." As he stepped out into the gray morning, the fog clung to the grass. For a moment he looked back at the monastery, warm light in a cold world. Then he turned west, toward the mountains, toward whatever came next. John left Pannonhalma before dawn, the fog heavy as a shroud over the fields. The monastery's faint light faded behind him, swallowed by the rolling hills. Ahead lay the Bacchany Mountains, steep and unwelcoming. His compass trembled in his hand. This path would test every ounce of his strength. The air grew colder as he ascended, trees thinning into jagged rocks. At times he had to stop and catch his breath, the weight of exhaustion settling deep in his bones. Wolves howled in the distance, but John kept moving, driven by the hope of seeing his family again. On the second night he found shelter in a hollowed-out cave, patching up a bleeding scratch from a thorn bush. Inside, a fire crackled, and the warmth reminded him of long-lost comforts. But comfort was a luxury he couldn't afford. Tomorrow meant moving forward. As dawn broke, he spotted a small village nestled in a valley below. Smoke rose from chimneys, but the place was eerily silent. John's heart beat faster. Were the people gone or hiding? He circled the perimeter carefully and heard whispers behind a boarded window. Suddenly, a boy burst from the shadows, eyes wide. "Who are you?" he demanded, clutching a rusty pistol. John raised his hands. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm looking for a woman and a girl, Lily." The boy hesitated, then nodded slowly. The villagers told stories of a warlord who took over the military base near Zurich, capturing anyone who resisted. Anna and Lily were prisoners there. The warlord used them as leverage, demanding obedience and tribute. John's jaw clenched. He was getting close. The road to Zurich was steep and treacherous, littered with the remnants of past battles. John avoided the main routes, choosing rocky trails and dense woods. He scavenged for food, ate what little he could find, and stayed alert to every sound. Sleep was a stranger now. One afternoon, a sudden gunshot echoed through the trees. John dropped behind a fallen log, heart pounding. 2 armed men passed by, speaking in harsh tones about patrols and prisoners. John waited until they disappeared, then moved on with renewed caution. Near the base, he discovered makeshift traps set around the perimeter, tripwires and spikes. The warlord expected visitors. John studied the layout from a hilltop, noting guards and patrol patterns. He had no weapons beyond his axe and a small knife. Stealth was his best ally. That night, John slipped into the compound under cover of darkness, moving silently between shadows. He heard muffled voices and the occasional cry from inside buildings. Every step felt like walking on a razor's edge. One wrong move could mean death for him and his family. In a dimly lit cell, he found Anna and Lily huddled together, pale but alive. Anna's eyes widened in disbelief when she saw John. "You came," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Lily clung to her mother, too scared to speak. John quickly untied their bonds and gave them water. "We have to move," he urged. Outside, alarms blared. Someone had spotted them. The warlord's guards flooded the corridors, shouting orders. There was no time to waste. They raced through winding hallways and staircases, dodging bullets and crashing doors. Anna held Lily close while John cleared the path ahead. Adrenaline surged through his veins, sharpening every sense. Escape was the only option. At the main gate, a brutal fight erupted. John swung his axe with desperate fury, taking down 2 guards before a third caught him off guard. Pain exploded in his side, but he pushed forward, fueled by love and desperation. The gate burst open. Outside, the cold mountain air hit them like a wave. The warlord's men chased them into the forest, but John led his family through hidden paths he had memorized. The sounds of pursuit faded as the trees swallowed them whole. Hours later, they reached a safe spot near a creek and attended to John's wound while Lily slept. John looked at his family, broken, but alive. He knew the world they had returned to was far from safe, but they had each other. "We'll find a way," John promised quietly. The future was uncertain, but hope glimmered brighter than ever. For the first time in a long while, John allowed himself a small, weary smile. Their journey had ended for now,